Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you so much for being with us today for the second panel in a series of Facebook Live panels on coping during COVID-19. All panels are recorded and available on Seattle Children's YouTube channel. The next panel will be held on Friday, May 1st at 2:30. Just to note that we are not discussing COVID-19 from a medical perspective. If you are looking for information, please use or visit the COVID-19 advisory page on seattlechildrens.org. Today, we'll be focusing on parenting, including how to manage our stress as parents and cope with difficult behaviors within the context of this challenging time. The panel will discuss skills and techniques for about 40 minutes, and then we'll have some time for Q&A. This event will remain on Seattle Children's Facebook page, and a recording of the panel will be available on our YouTube channel in the coming days. We will be updating seattlechildrens.org/coping and COVID with resources and information as well. So let's do some introductions. My name is Kendra Reed, and I'm a clinical psychologist and the director of anxiety programs at Seattle Children's within the Department of Psychiatry. I'd also like to introduce Tyler Sasser, who is also a clinical psychologist and the director of behavioral treatment in the Pearl Clinic, an ADHD and behavior clinic. I'm also incredibly excited to introduce Shayla Collins and Krista Hansen, parent mindfulness class facilitators with the Finding Strength and Finding Your Way parent and caregiver mindfulness classes. So thanks so much for being here, Shayla and Krista. So Tyler, why don't you take it away? Why are we here today?
We are, first of all, very excited to be with everybody today, and excited to, I think, to share a little bit about the experiences that we're hearing, from families during this really challenging, difficult time. And also, I think even a little bit about our own experiences and the challenges we're facing, all of us being parents to young kids, and in many instances, young kids with disabilities and challenges as well. I think that our goal in this meeting is really to say, to the families out there listening, we see you, and we think you're doing a great job in all the efforts that you're making. This is a challenging time for so many different reasons. The worries and anxieties that we have just as people about the uncertainties around medical issues, but also the uncertainties around the future for our families, economic, and even in terms of things like hunger. And we really are wanting to just say that this is such a hard and challenging time, and we believe in you. And our goal is to bring folks together who have some knowledge or expertise that we could discuss, and hopefully some very practical strategies. And so I agree, Kendra, we're just so excited to have Shayla and Krista here with us to share about their experiences, particularly with using mindfulness strategies. What I'd like to do, I guess, is to really, hand it off, I think, first to Krista to tell us a little bit about, herself, and also and a bit of her journey, as well as some of those kind of core strategies that parents might be able to adopt and kind of take up, right now during this challenging time.
Thanks. So my name is Krista Hansen, and I am a parent and teacher. And I just want to start by thanking Kendra and Tyler for welcoming Shayla and I at Seattle Children's. And then also I wanted to start by naming where I've learned what I'm going to share, which is from my kids. First of all, I have a 10-year-old with a disability who that's changed his life and our life really significantly. And so because of him, I have met some really incredible mentors in the disability community, and also working with Shayla and other parents of kids with chronic health conditions, disabilities, mental and behavioral challenges. These are my teachers. I've learned so much. So I'm here really just sharing what people have been so generous in sharing with me about really, I learned 10 years ago when my son was born what it's like to parent under stressful circumstances. So one of the tools that I found then and came to believe in, so now I share it with others, is mindfulness. And mindfulness, I was thinking about how sometimes people show up, you become a believer and you're like, this is the thing that you need that will make parenting easier. And it's not that. It's not the thing, right? But it's a thing that's helped a lot of us. So I'm here to just give a little taste of what that looks like and tell you how it's impacted my parenting and some of the parents I know. And then Shayla will share as well. So mindfulness, I'm sure people on this call have really broad experiences, from lots of experience to brand new. And so I wanted to say that it's just the one definition of mindfulness is just being curious about the present moment, particularly of my own inner experience, without trying to change it, or looking inside myself at what's happening for me with curiosity and kindness. And that is a sentence that is just so much easier said than done. I just want to name that. So one way that we practice mindfulness is meditation. And I am not here under COVID to suggest you take up a new meditation practice, because I assume none of us have some extra time right now. But you can practice mindfulness, and I practice it in really small moments of paying attention deeply. And I think of the practice of mindfulness like the practice that an athlete or a musician does, where you practice you kind of create the conditions that make it easy to practice, right? Like setting aside a tiny bit of time. And by a tiny bit, I mean like while I'm listening to hold music, trying to make an appointment, or sitting at a red light. So these tiny bits of time where I have to wait anyway, to pay just deep attention, and practice by anchoring my attention in that moment to anything, right? And any one thing, really, a sound, the feeling of my heartbeat, feet on the ground. So it's okay with you, Kendra, Shayla, Tyler. I'll lead a tiny practice, and anyone who's watching, you can do it with us, or you could come back to this later and do it. But I'll pick 3 things that you could rest your attention in for just a couple of moments. And you can do this. I often practice with my eyes closed. You can practice with your eyes open or closed, whatever's comfortable. So take a deep breath. Maybe another. And the first place you might place all of your curious attention is in listening, is in noticing for a few moments what sounds you can hear. Far away, nearby. Another place you might rest your attention is in some part of you that is touching a floor or the chair. So maybe your feet are on the floor. Maybe you can feel your back, your legs, your seat in a chair. Whatever place is pressing down towards the earth, take a moment to feel that if you like. Noticing if there's some detail that you can feel that you wouldn't have noticed if you hadn't paused. Another place you might, and I'm giving these options to people, different anchors, different places for attention resonate for different people. So another place we often place our attention is on our breath. So you could take maybe 3 deep breaths, noticing just the sensation of breath coming in and out. Thank you for trying that with me if you followed along. So these very short moments of practice, I have found feed my practice of being able to, under more stressful circumstances, like a child having a tantrum or, big life fears, and certainly right now, just giving me a little bit of a sense of power if I notice how I'm feeling, if I can pause and notice. And so I was thinking of just sharing that, like, I don't meditate or do these practices to be good at the practices. I don't meditate to be a good meditator. I do them because the the ability to pause that I've learned over many, many years um, it doesn't take away like what life hands to me. Going back to the beginning, my son's really difficult diagnosis. And it doesn't take away the hard feelings, right? In the beginning, terror really at that time. Um, but what it does allow me to do is slow down and notice my reaction, so that I don't add another layer of suffering, sometimes is a word we use, of, for me, often that other layer is shame, of feeling bad about my feelings. For some of us, and this is me too, sometimes is anger and taking it out on the people nearest to me, which during stay at home is my family. So if I can slow these things down, I have more choice around what happens with difficult feelings. And I appreciated a conversation that the four of us were having yesterday. And anyway, and Tyler was like, well, couldn't there be extra layers? And it's like, yeah, there could be. We can have many. This can go on, right? And I'm sure everyone on this call knows that. So anyway, I guess that's just what I wanted to say about that's why I do these practices, why I bring this, and why I love teaching with Shayla and other parents. And I thought I would just end with a story, a really short story of saying that, like this, a recent, a pre-COVID, but it could have been yesterday, it sort of was yesterday as well, experience of doing this in my family is that I have a 5-year-old who, 6 months ago discovered her power of getting out of bed and dancing around the room and dancing around the house for hours when it was past her bedtime. And she became delirious and got, in her mind, funnier and funnier each night over the hours. And I just felt myself go from angry to really irrational, like this sense of, I was exhausted, taking care of my other child is exhausting, getting all my stuff done, right? So maybe somewhat there's some parallels to right now, just the amount of stress that made me really irrational, in this sense of like, I'm never gonna sleep again. If she doesn't go to bed right now, never gonna sleep again. And these like fantasies of like pulley systems that would just like make it, tie her down to her bed. And I got to the point of not only feeling really worked up about the bedtime situation, but feeling really bad that I was actually imagining, like caging my child in her bedroom. And I truly tell this story because in that moment, I got to the place of feeling really bad about myself. And I guess I want to say, if parents take anything away from today, that it may, like, under stressful circumstances, none of us are perfect. And the practice that I offer of the pause is that there was a night, right, where I felt really bad about myself, but have been many, many times where these deep frustrations, these, maybe taking my frustration out on someone else, that I'm able to pause and back up and be with my feelings before I take it out on my family, before I take it out on myself. And I think I'm gonna pass it off to Shayla, because I also want to say that, it has been really, really powerful to share space with other families and learn from other families about how they are taking these practices home. We offer these classes where people, come back a week later and share with us. And I can think of parents who say, like, this was the best week I've had with my child in months or years, because I was able to just take a few deep breaths. And it can just feel so powerful to interrupt a cycle that we've wanted to interrupt for so long. And so I bring that here, knowing that we're here, not hoping that we get to be our idealized selves, because that's just impossible right now, but that we can be kind with ourselves, and that might give us a little bit of space to be closer to the parents that we want to be, since we're on so much right now. So I'm gonna pass it on to Miss Shayla Collins, the real expert. So thank you for having me.
Krista. It's great.
Thank you, Miss Krista. Good day, everyone. I would like to say thank you for tuning in and say hello to all my peeps out there. You know how I am. I'm going to start with a small introduction about me. I have 2 children with disabilities, and I can tell you that I was not handling that well. I needed something that was going to help support me in processing such difficult emotions, particularly when I didn't necessarily know anybody else who was going through that at that moment, of course, and I didn't know where to go. So mindfulness has been extremely helpful to me, both personally and professionally. So I just wanted to start with that. I'm going to follow up Miss Krista's portion with talking about self-compassion. The things that I'm going to speak to you about are things that I personally use and the way in which I speak to myself. And so, first, I'd like to start out with a quote that I feel is very appropriate for every single one of us on this Facebook Live right now. So I'll read it and I'll tell you what's by. It says, "Accept yourself as you are. And that is the most difficult thing in the world, because it goes against your training, your education, and your culture. From the very beginning, you have been told how you should be. Nobody has ever told you that you are as good as you are." And that is by Osho, Osho. And I got it off of Britney Spears' Instagram page, if you wanted to know that. Okay, so I'm going to ask you all to go ahead and raise your hand in your home when I ask you this question. For how many of you is this your second, third, or fourth pandemic? Right. It's a trick question. This is new. None of us know what we're doing in this. Everyone must make space for grace and give others space. You understand? And you deserve that too. This is not normal. For most of us, our brains are in survival mode right now. And if that is new to you, I want to tell you, your children do not need 12 hours of Mesopotamia studies a day, geometry either. And if we weren't physics teachers prior to COVID, you're probably not a physics teacher now. So I would like you to understand, if you didn't necessarily have those skills prior to this, how do you then expect to use them and execute them perfectly in a crisis? Chill out, you all. Be good to yourselves. We deserve that. One thing I started to learn is how hard on myself I was. And when you're hard on yourself, you are often harder on others. And like Miss Krista said, that often happens to be our children. At this point, I've gotten to the place where my parents and my friends and my husband have tried to help work with me on lowering my expectations of myself and others. And I am going to tell you, I am what is called a WIP, W-I-P. I'm a work in progress, so I'm not there yet. But anyhow, I need you all to reframe how things are going in your brain about how you feel about your parenting at the moment if you're feeling bad. I need you to be proud of yourself. Have you fed the child like recently? Have you hugged them today? Have you had a meaningful conversation? Did you bathe them this week? Did you have a bath this week? All the babies need is for you to be the person that you needed when you were a child. They don't need perfection, and nobody's going to get perfection in a crisis. So I'm going to move forward with some tangibles that I use, and please understand that this takes practice. I'm still practicing. It's not going to come overnight. It's a lifelong journey. We are lifelong learners. So I know that one must first know their priorities and accept that all of them will not be done, nor will they be done perfectly. That's real life. And we're in real life in a crisis. Okay? We must pause and then choose whether we are going to respond, react, or do nothing. But you are in control. Whichever you decide, you must be present in that decision. That pause is that space between whatever got you where you're at and where you about to go. I'm gonna need you to have that space in there so that when you make your choice, whichever you decide, that you're present and you're doing it with intention. Know that your children, other people's children, and people are watching you very, very closely. And that's how we teach, through how we present and how we act. Most of the time, don't nobody listen to what we say. You guys know that. So this is how I'll close, and it's my favorite part of how I use meditation, or excuse me, mindfulness. You must customize your mindfulness experience. You must do whatever it is that is appropriate for you to reach a place where you can at least stabilize enough to then make more rational decisions. Much easier said than done. And I'll back up and say, like I said, it takes practice, years, decades, whatever. But you need to get to know and do what works best for you. That takes a lot of inner work, takes a lot of time. I'm not telling you, to necessarily add that during a crisis, but know that even just taking a pause, you're making strides, you're making momentum. And as far as the customizing the mindfulness, one of my mentors, he meditates to Carlos Santana. A friend of mine chants in her mother tongue. My husband likes to clean the car inside and out, spotless. And then me, I play my favorite songs by Tupac or Roddy Ricch real loud and rap them until I am out of breath. And then I need a nap. But I want you to know today that everyone on this call, you are worthy. You are not broken. You are valuable. And you are in uncharted waters of a crisis. Try mindfulness out, but even if you don't, be good to yourself. Thank you.
Layla, thank you so much for sharing about your experience, and also those, how to apply, I guess, like self-compassion and really being kind to yourself in the midst of something that's so such a hard time. And I think too, like reflecting even on what has helped you at other times, right? And bringing those things in. These are uncharted waters, and I wonder if the blasting the music and cleaning the car, those aren't new things, but they still apply.
No, Tupac's been around for a while. No, we've been blasting him. Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, so reflecting on like, well, what's worked for me, like historically, what's helped me to kind of cope emotionally, bounce back in at least in the moment, momentarily.
Back to your inner wisdom, your inner resources. We have it inside of us. It's been schooled out of us and other things, but we have to go back to the basics of us. Just go back to that. And I'm very thankful for where mindfulness has brought me and the people that it has brought me into contact with, and all of you viewing.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I think what we'd like to do is to, I think Kendra and I, we represent different specialty areas here in our clinic. anxiety for Kendra, and ADHD, but broadly speaking, attention, impulse control, behavior types of challenges. And we're working all the time with families. And I again, like, I think it's remarkable, like, how well everything that Krista and Shayla are talking about here, weave in with the strategies and the things we're talking about with parents. One thing I think that I reacted to, Shayla, and what you said too, is, telling ourselves essentially, like, I like myself, I like you, me, just the way, that you are, accepting yourself. And oftentimes, we're raising kind of a similar prompt for parents about our children, right? Our children right now, and I think it is normal in any given moment, and maybe many times, to feel like, oh my gosh, I don't like my child.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like this situation. I don't like what they're doing right now. And maybe things are so hard that I'm feeling, I'm thinking a lot of, I'm having lots of reactions to this, a lot of negative maybe reactions to it. And it's making me feel badly that I'm thinking those things. I think, Krista, you hit on this as well. So I wanted to just, I want to highlight that theme of it as well, trying to, I guess I'm wondering if either of you could comment on this, on part of this question related to mindfulness, and then how it translates forward into like parenting in the moment, which is the non-judgmental aspect of it, right? So reflecting on our experience, and then how does that moment of stopping and catching ourselves, how does that then move forward into kind of next steps, or thinking about, like, how do I want to approach this problem? I wonder if either of you can speak to that. Shayla or Krista.
You want to go first?
Chris? Is that you telling me to go first?
Yep.
Okay. I think about some really, just like, it's like, they seem so basic, but, like, telling my kid from across the house over and over to stop what she's doing and come to dinner, or to get my other kids' attention, but I'm in the middle of something else. Like, I'm not giving them my attention, and I'm getting worked up because they're not listening to me, and, it's just, I don't know, I feel silly because it's such basic parenting advice, but boy, it works when I stop what I'm doing and I go and I give them my attention and deeply enough to be like, oh, that thing that was registering as a giant mess in my brain is, you tying pipe cleaners to Legos and creating an elephant car, and like, wow. And when, our kids can do that all the time. My kid gets so immersed in curiosity, right? And if I can, that pause and go enjoy, because it is really, particularly my little one is so creative right now. Like, if I can stop and do that, and then if I noticed it, that she, I also get an outcome that I want, which is she's more likely to, she's not likely to clean up still, but more likely to come to dinner,
That's great.
Yeah.
I'll say very quickly. I'm not saying I'm not judgmental. I'm not a guru yet. On my way. But I've had to, over time, take a pause and ask myself, how is this judgment I'm giving myself interacting with my family, how is this helpful right now? I mean, just very simple. How is this helpful? Now, when I came to the realization of that statement, it didn't stop me being judgmental, but it gave me a moment to notice where I was at, or what exactly I was feeling, why, and what my response would be that would make me feel better for the most part. And in all reality, sometimes they don't. But how is it helpful to just keep beating yourself up? I mean, we've been doing this for ages now. I mean, it's old. Like, come on. Has not been helpful. So let's think of things that we already have inside of us, or around us, that can help us get to a place where we can make the next better decision. We're not talking perfect, just continuing growth.
Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, I think I can pick up maybe like right there. What I'd like to do is to help extend these to maybe some to some practical types of strategies. But the examples that the two of you just gave, I think, are are the exact conversations that we're having, with families in our clinical groups as well all the time. But there's such everyday things. There's such, it's those little experiences repeating themselves over and over that start to build up compound the stress level. That's that kind of cascading, compounding effect that we had talked about the other day, is kind of frustration on frustration on frustration, both at our kids and ourselves and the situation, and it just is building. And so I really love, I think the advice that you've given, like to pause and then really, I think, to control what our attention is focused on. And I think that what I would say is that there's no more powerful teaching tool that we have than our attention with our kids, what we pay attention to. And Shayla, you said it so beautifully that, like, so often we think that it's our mouth that does the teaching, right? It's our mouth that does the teaching. And really, it's so often it's what we give attention and what that attention looks like. And so one of the metaphors that I have found, personally very helpful, is to think about a parent's attention and how they interact with their kids almost like a grow light, right? That we can shine this grow light selectively on different behaviors that our children are exhibiting at any given time. Now, our automatic reaction is almost, and this is not a judgment, this is me, I'm saying this of myself. The automatic reaction is almost always to shower attention or shine our bright grow light on the negative behaviors, right? So in Krista's example, the non-compliance, we're yelling and yelling that you're not coming. And the way I like to think about it is, flowers and weeds, so to speak, right? In that example, the non-compliance part of it may be being a weed, where the flower might be either like coming when we asked, or we can just change the situation by going over there and making some degree of connection and shining our grow light on their creativity in that moment and helping to smooth out that transition, right? So really thinking like, how am I controlling, right, self-regulating what I am paying attention to in the moment? I can think of a personal example with this that, again, predates COVID, but is so relevant. When my son, who's 7 now and who has ADHD and has had a lot of challenges resisting academic tasks and things that he perceives as boring or hard, and having kind of like a strong emotional reaction and even wanting to physically flee from those activities. When we first started doing work at home with him, it was resistance every single time. It could be the smallest possible task and it would be resistance. And in that moment, I would find myself attending to the resistance and really feeling negative, like shining my light on that thing and almost trying to coerce or talk him into it, as though I could reason with him in that moment when he's wanting to flee. And trying to catch myself and say, all right, what is the thing I want? What is the flower here? What could be the flower here? What is the opposite, the positive thing I do want to shine my light on? And that would be persistence, doing something when it's really hard, and I believe you can do it. And I believe in you, right? I believe in you. And so how do I then pause, collect myself, and try to really identify, okay, Tyler, don't fall for that trap. Don't fall for the trap right there, to engage with or get escalated by the resistance and the whining and the throwing himself on the floor, and say, I'm going to sit here calmly. I'm going to sit here calmly, and I'm going to sing a song in my head, or I'm going to say, it's going to be worth it, Tyler. It's going to be worth it, right? And I'm going to white knuckle it through if I have to. I'm going to white knuckle it. I'm going to get through this moment sitting here on the couch and wait for him to come back. Have confidence. If I wait this out, he will come back. and he will read a word, or he will start to sound one out. And you know what I can do at the first moment that he tries? You're trying, even though it's hard. Thank you. And of course, that just makes him more angry, right? Immediately, right? So he resists, big emotional reaction to my efforts. Then I'm going to quickly turn my grow light away. The second he starts up again, bam, I'm going to pounce and I'm going to shine my attention on that. So I really think, like, even thinking about like the way our eyes, where our eyes are faced, right, is where our grow light is shining, right? So if we're in the kitchen and we're yelling, we might be missing, an opportunity to shine a light on something. Not that we can always be available, but if I want to shine my light on the creativity or smooth out this transition, my grow light probably needs to be right there, shining on the behaviors that I want to see more of. Another, if I have a few more minutes, do I have another minute? Yeah, okay. I want to, so the grow light thing has been really impactful for me in thinking about, like, literally what I'm looking at and talking about as being my grow light. And then another strategy I think that really comes from the world of mindfulness, and that we've really tried to adopt and incorporate into our parenting programs, is a strategy that's called, like, the STOP strategy. And STOP is an acronym, and it stands for, and I find this very, very helpful personally. So when something challenging, upsetting, frustrating is happening, and it could be in our own life, or it could be in a parenting, right? I mean, in our own life, as in, like, as an individual, it could be in a parenting situation. To, before I react, stop, take a step back. And I mean literally physically take a step back from my child in that moment, because so often our urge is to, like, almost like lunge forward or get closer to our child, right? And that will almost always escalate things in the moment. And then I think this fits really nicely with what Krista and Shayla talked about, is the O is observe. And that is to take a step back and observe our automatic reaction, and to reflect on, I think even questions, Shayla, you hit on this as well, like, is this work? Like, does responding this automatic way work? Has it been working for me, right? Is this working? And then once we've kind of collected ourselves, the P is proceed mindfully and effectively. Right, so proceed mindfully and effectively. And I have another story that I guess I could quickly share. That is a more recent experience. In the last week or so, trying to make, I guess, lemonade out of lemons. Have took it on to try to teach my kids to ride their bikes, which they hadn't known how to do at all before. And it was going pretty well, I would say, over a couple days. And then we hit this point where I don't know where my headspace was. I couldn't even tell you where my headspace was, but I wasn't in the same, like, positive, you got this, confident headspace, both with myself or my kids. And suddenly I was, like, almost punitively saying to my son, and it was right when he was starting to learn to kind of pedal and keep the bike by himself, like, no, you need to pedal faster. No, you need to pedal harder. No, you need to push down harder on the pedals. And like, is what I'm saying true? Like, yeah, it's true that will keep the bike going forward if he were to do that thing. But you know how he reacted? He burst out into tears, and he started to try to walk his bike back toward the car. And oh my gosh, I will say this was not a probably like a self-control mindfulness moment. This was an, oh crud, mindfulness moment, where based on his reaction to what I was doing, I was like, okay, I'm going to stop. I'm going to take a step back. I'm going to ask myself, okay, what's driving my behavior right now? Where is this coming from for me? And is this effective? And it's pretty clearly wasn't helping anything in the situation. And so what I did in that moment was to say to him, oh man, I'm so sorry. You know what? Daddy's being negative, isn't he? Like, daddy's being, like, way, way, way too negative. Like, he's just saying, no. Does daddy need to do that? And of course he says, no, absolutely no. Through tears says no. I said, you know what? For the rest of the time that we're here, you know what, you got this. You were like, you were right there. And you know what, I believe in you. You're going to get this. You don't even need a teacher. And for the rest of the time, I'm not going to teach or say no or anything. The rest of the time that we do this, all I'm going to say is I'm going to tell you when you're doing great and awesome and I believe in you, and that's it. And saying it out loud, the act of telling him that I was going to do that, I had then like committed myself down this path of having to follow through on that thing. And he did do it, right? Like the confidence was warranted because I did not do any teaching. All I did was praise after that. And he is riding a bike now. So we ended at the same thing. Thank you. We ended at the same point. But I think of that as kind of like two paths diverging almost in a way, where we could have ended at this point with me criticizing him and thinking like, oh, he really needed me to be the coach. He couldn't have done it without me. Like, geez, he never would have pushed hard enough on those pedals. But that obviously wasn't true, right? In that moment. So like, for me, I felt like it was a very humbling experience, and one that I hope that I'll take forward in terms of having confidence in him and expressing that, and also really catching myself from getting into that a negative space, because I think I get there a lot as well.
Keep practicing.
Yeah. Tyler, thank you so much for sharing that. It reminds me so much of this phrase that we use in the anxiety world that I certainly can't take credit for, but Eli Leibovitz came up with this, and I just pick it up because I think it's been so great. But it is essentially describes that support is really validating that something is hard, plus confidence that you can do hard things. And we think about applying that to our kids, but I also think about how important this conversation has been about applying that to ourselves. How are we actually supporting ourselves? And Krista and Shayla, you've done a beautiful job of illustrating just how support for ourselves is validating that it's hard. I'm stressed, I'm frustrated, and validating I can do hard things in these moments. So I do want to transition to our Q&A section here. So I'm going to pose some questions that have come in from our audience, and we are going to take some turns answering those questions. So I'll pose them to the group, and we'll see what you all think. Our first question comes from Ashley. Ashley says, "My 4-year-old daughter is starting to want to play games where her stuffed animals die. I don't know how to handle this. She sustained a broken leg a month ago and was treated at Children's and is processing that on top of this epidemic. Maybe she's processing all that is happening now and manifesting this way. Any advice is much appreciated." So I just want to say, Ashley, that it is super, super common for young kids to start to bring the things that are happening in their everyday lives into their play. And it doesn't mean anything bad about your daughter at all. It is possible that for a 4-year-old, this is the first time that she has maybe heard about or is thinking about death, which is a really complicated experience, or not even experience, but concept for a young child to understand. And bringing things into play is just how kids try to make sense of their world. So I would say that this is totally normal. And it's okay for you to engage in that play with her, which would allow you some opportunity to correct misunderstandings as they pop up and get a sense of whether or not she's worried about it or if she's just kind of thinking about the topic. Would you guys have anything else that you would want to add to that? Shayla, I see you shaking your head. That's fair.
I suppose I agree entirely. I think that play themes, especially at that age, 4 years old, vary considerably. And so even in a family with multiple kids, I think parents observe that the kids at the same stages just didn't play the same, maybe at all, that they had different themes and interests. And so I think those things are very idiosyncratic. And I would agree with Kendra. So I think, speaking from the perspective of a clinical psychologist, I would agree, like, normalizing that makes a lot of sense. and also too, like that confidence kind of that we've been kind of talking about is to have confidence that your child is developing well, and that this is not necessarily like a reason at all to be concerned. Yeah.
I'll move on to the next question. I think this will be a good one for all of us. So this question comes from Gianna. Gianna says, my anxiety is high given that I'm a single mom to a 13-year-old. What if I get sick and have to go to the hospital? I've been exercising during my lunch break, trying a bit of meditation and long baths. It's not easy hiding how I'm feeling from her. How much should I share? So I want to open this up to the group, but I guess I would say I don't want parents to be in a position where they are hiding their emotions from their family in a very significant way, because we are our children's teachers. So with that, I'll lead it to the group because I could talk about this for hours. So I want to hear what you guys have to say.
Oh, that's it. That's all I got. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think I would just add to that you must know your daughter so well, right? That when my two kids, I feel like they're 5 and 10, they're in really different places, and they can handle emotions and how much emotion I share so differently. But in general, they can handle more than I give them credit for, I would say, especially when I'm being really honest about this is me, and this isn't about you. This is just me needing to have some emotions. And so I would really trust you to know how much your daughter can be there with you. 13 can look so different and from 13-year-old to 13-year-old, but especially I think being just the two of you, I would assume, from knowing you're a single mom at home, that's a lot to hold that just in a bath, right? Or just on your lunch breaks to take care of yourself. That my guess is that your kid can be in it with you.
I want to add to that. I am really a fan of, or I guess I would advise that families have these kind of more frank or direct conversations, especially with their older kids, about what's going on, and just reflecting, wow, I'm feeling stressed about this. I'm feeling really anxious or fearful. Your ability to talk about those emotions frankly destigmatizes those emotions. Your daughter likely looks up to you more than you know, and your ability to say, hey, I'm feeling something that's hard, and bring it to conversation is not only modeling how to cope with that in a really adaptive way, but also showing her, hey, it's really okay to have these emotions. And it's possible that she might turn around and say, me too, mom. It may also give you a chance to do some problem solving in the chance that you do become ill. She might say, well, I've already thought of that, mom. I would just go over to my friend's house. She might surprise you with her problem solving abilities. Or you would at least be able to kind of have this be a conversation for what your family plan would be. So, yeah, Tyler, anything you would add?
I just would double down on the modeling aspect of this. I think I tend to work with younger, kids than teenagers, but at any age, I think the kind of core things when we're trying to. There's a bit of a noise here. I'll just press forward. I'll just keep going. But the things that we're usually thinking about in teaching that stuff is to label the problem, right, that's happening, right, and then the emotion that you're having, right, and then to stop, right, like we've talked about today, to really stop and give some space for that, and then see if they're together, engaging in some degree of identifying some possible solutions for that. But I would agree that there's so much that can be learned together as a family right now. And the other thing, I'll just go back to what I said at the very beginning, which is, we think you're doing great. You were doing awesome things. You said that you're trying to exercise, and I can't remember the other thing, but there was another healthy coping.
Take long baths, meditate.
Oh yeah, you're doing a lot of great things. So you can do all these things and still feel anxious, right? I think Shayla and Krista did a really nice job. Like, it doesn't solve all of our problems. It is oftentimes, it is very kind of like day to day, moment to moment, and that illustrates the importance of the practice aspect.
And I just want to jump in here and share something about anxiety that you can almost never stop me from saying, which is that anxiety is an important adaptive emotion. If you are feeling, it's the emotion that keeps us safe when something is going to threaten our lives, right? So if we go to walk to cross the street and a car comes zooming by, it's the emotion that makes us jump back up on the curb. So if you are feeling anxious in the middle of a pandemic, you have a functioning nervous system. This is generally good news. You are not doing it wrong. It really doesn't feel good. And it can feel incredibly uncomfortable, and you may not know what to do with this feeling. But I just want to say, as part of this, like our discussion of mindfulness, of observing how you're feeling without judgment, I hope that this piece of information may help in that quest of saying, like, I am observing myself feeling anxious, and of course I am anxious. It is an incredibly stressful time. Um, so just want to, we have several other questions coming in. So this one is from Megan, and Megan asks, how can I tell if my children ages 6 and 3 are acting out due to stress, or if it's just age typical? Does it matter the reason? Take it away, panelists.
I can take a swing at that, yeah, too. I think, of course, again, like, just like adults who are out of their routine and experiencing all these stresses, I think it would be really normal to expect that our kids, that ages 6 or 3, that there is going to be some degree of an impact on kind of their, I guess, like, emotional functioning, emotional coping, and still, I think, pausing and I think asking ourselves that question of, right, like, regardless, to your point, does it matter? Regardless of whether it's due to stress, anxiety, or it's typical normative behavioral challenges, I think the question is, what is it, going back to the stop strategy, what does it mean maybe to proceed mindfully and effectively in that moment, right? Are these behaviors that are happening, again, like going to the grow light, are they flowers, things that we want to promote and see more of from our kids, or are they more weeds, things that we would like to see less of, right? And so how are we using our attention, right? Regardless of whether it's a stress response. I know that Kendra, you would tend to agree, even if it is an anxiety response. If we can sometimes accidentally shine our grow light on things like worries and a stress response that can be maladaptive in a way, maladaptive coping strategies from our kids. And so we want to be thinking, like, then what is the flower? What is the thing that I'm wanting to promote here? And how do I use my attention regardless of what the underlying kind of cause or issue is in that moment? Yeah.
I would second that. Just, one of the things that has been wonderful about having these panels is just seeing how similar we all are in our perspectives and the advice that we have. And though Tyler and I work in different clinics at the hospital, our advice to parents around these behaviors is the same, regardless of whether you've come to my anxiety clinic or whether you've gone to Tyler's behavior clinic, or whether you are our friends and we just happen to be talking about what's going on in your life. So I think that Tyler's right, that the behaviors that matter to your family are what are more important to me, and understanding the reason can be helpful, and your ability to stop and proceed mindfully is key in that effort.
Respond very quickly. I don't have the answer to the question whether it be behavior or you mean age or diagnosis. I don't even look at that anymore. I don't care. I blame it on genetics. They got it from their grandparents. Just go with that and move right along. And but I'm just being silly, but I don't have the answer. But in our household, anything that looks like it didn't come from me, grandparents did it.
I think that's really beautiful, Shayla, because one of the things that I think is really important, we call it, I mean, our like psycho jargon for this is externalizing the problem, right? But essentially making the problem as something that's separate from you.
Reframe that. We got to reframe it. It didn't got nothing to do with me. They didn't get it from me. I know where they got it.
Right. We are a team against this problem. The problem isn't you or you. Our family is the team. Family is first. Okay, I have another question to pose to you all. Doreen asks, I'm not sure how much information to give my kids 5 and 9 about the virus and what is happening. Any advice on the balance between sheltering and providing them with the truth? I have some thoughts on this.
Yeah, I suppose I do too. I think the 13-year-old, the question that we had kind of before, I think considering, this was said before, you know your children far better than we would, right? So a 5-year-old and a 9-year-old, they're not all, not all 5-year-olds are the same, not all 9-year-olds are the same. And so really considering like, what would I typically, outside of this context, be talking to my kids about, right? Like, my son is he's all, in addition to having ADHD, he's also a worrier as well. And so if we were in the car and listening to NPR and there was something on the radio that was like about violence or weather events and things like that, those things would tend to be, my son would very quickly start asking tons of questions about those things. And I don't know that it's sheltering necessarily, but I would say for him as an individual, like I'm usually trying to find a way that like we can have those conversations, but under where I can scaffold them and he's not being exposed to or engaging with material that's like well beyond like what he can kind of be handling or coping with. And so I think that I guess like what I would think is like, what would you have done at any time really in terms of the information and how to convey that or discuss that with either of the kids? Because I'm certain that they're different. What you would talk about the 5-year-old is different than what you would do with a 9-year-old.
I mean, I could not, I mean, I'm not the parenting expert, so I'll just speak because I have a 5 and 10-year-old, so I'll just speak as a parent and just say that we have, there's so many resources out there right now for kids. So we've just sort of like offered one at a time. We did a podcast with both kids and one of the coloring sheets with a 5-year-old, and then just have been watching how much they're interested in. And my other experience is that because of the world of the diagnosis and disability that we live in, my kids are aware of things like death and pretty devastating disability. And so I am a huge proponent of honest conversation in general when kids, as much as kids want to know, but no more. And so also like my daughter plays really close attention, so I'm also turning off the radio when it's not kid specific. For her, my son tunes it out, and so we leave it on if it's just him in the car. So I would just sort of backing Tyler and say that's similar to what we're doing in our family offering, and then seeing how much they want to know and not denying them any information, but also not pushing.
Exactly. I would recommend having that frank conversation to your child's developmental level, which again you are the expert on, and also to their level of interest, just like Krista is saying. That gives you a chance, like just allowing like a platform for that in your home allows an opportunity for you to hear about worries that they might have without assuming that that's what's going on. Just as much as I'm hearing about worried kids, when I hear about that a lot, that's my job. I'm also hearing about kids that are like ecstatic to not have to go to school, or there are a lot of different emotional reactions happening. So sometimes we have to be mindful of how our emotions might be coloring our assumptions about our children's emotions. So just something to think about there. Just pulling another question for our team here. This is from Crystal. Crystal asks, what are some of the decisions and choices you're making in the moment? And how do you know if you're doing the right one anymore? For context, we have an ADHD, ODD kindergartner, and the difficulty begins with waking up. So how do you pick your battles, it sounds like? Oh, and I just want to say, this, we'll answer this question. We are just at time here. So, but we will answer this question in just a minute. But for those of you who can only stay until 3:30, thank you so much for joining us today. Please join us again in 2 weeks on Friday, May 1st at 2:30 for our next panel. We won't have time to get to all of our questions, but we will do our best to respond to the questions we've received after the panel ends. We'll take 2 more questions, this one included, if you have the time to stick with us. And for more resources and information on supporting mental health and family life during COVID-19, visit seattlechildrens.org/coping and COVID. Thank you so much to our wonderful guests, Shayla and Krista and Tyler, our marketing and communications colleagues, and the AV team for their time, expertise, and support. So two more questions now. We're going to revisit. How do you pick? How do you pick?
Can I jump in and just say one thing about the key takeaways, which is that if folks want to take the classes that Shayla and I are offering, that will be posted on the Facebook page, the way to get to the parent mindfulness classes. So just wanted to, since it didn't make it onto the slide, for people to look in the Facebook comments so you can find that. It's a free resource. I just wanted that to be something available.
Thanks so much, Krista. Thanks so much. Yeah. All right, team. How do we pick our battles in this time? Go for it, Shayla.
One of the things I said is knowing your priorities. You have 5 things you want to get done. Pick 2. When you get those done, pat yourself on the back and then wait for the other 3 another day. I mean, I know it's not that simplified. But what is the most important things for you to get done within your day or whatever window that you're using, and then start from there and know that it is already not going to be perfect. It's not going to be easy, and determine how much you want to do, how far you want to go, or if you want to do it. You have the opportunity to take a pause, respond, react, or let it go. And it's, like I said, it's very oversimplified, but sometimes you're just not going to get a bath before bed. I'm not about to fight you. Go to bed. You know what I mean? Like, choose what is most important and stick with them in small goals, and lower your expectations of yourself and the baby.
I just want to highlight that in that question, it was said, what are the right ones? And I think
no right ones
are here to say that there are any right or wrong goals.
No.
We might all 4 of us might be making those choices very differently for our families.
And depending on what day and time of the day, it could be different. Like we talked a moment by moment here.
Yes.
You just roll.
Yeah.
I could jump in here too. I think the specific populations that you mentioned, ADHD and ODD, those are my people, and the families I'm spending the vast majority of my time with, and you know, at the risk of oversimplifying, and which I am not, I truly appreciate just how challenging it is when, like you said, from the moment you are trying to wake up with your kiddo in the morning and get started, there's a degree of resistance to seemingly small things that we feel like should be easy for them, easy for us in those moments. And I think we've hit on, a lot of different things to be thinking about how to apply. One is a degree of I think non-judgmental approach to ourselves, right? There isn't, you know, I don't think we're going to say that there is one or even 2 or 3 right things to do here. And then the other 2 is another thing I would be thinking about too is assuming that this is hard, right, for our kiddo, right, in that moment, that a degree of non-judgmentalness with ourselves and also with our child. And that I think is probably the most challenging aspect of what you're asking about here, which is that They're digging in heels metaphorically, or engaged, starting a tug of war over something, or maybe just being irritable and grumpy, right? You're trying to be warm and loving, maybe snuggle in the morning, and gosh, you're getting a lot of negativity back. But that's a very common thing for the families that I'm working with, and I think that like assuming that our children, if they could do better, they would. If they could do better, they would. If it came easy, like of course they would just choose to do better, because that would be the easy path. And right now that's not where they are. However, it can get better. And so I just want to convey, like, thank you for asking the question. And we believe like this is exceptionally challenging, and it can get better, and you can figure out the strategies. The one quick one that I would apply, I know this isn't quick at all, I'm giving like the longest answer ever. I could talk and talk and talk and talk and talk, as many people know who are with us here. The grow light, the resisting the irritability, the grumpiness that starts out right in the morning. Is it a flower or a weed? Is it a flower or a weed, right? And I know we got to get up and we got to get moving. And what I would be really cognizant of is like, how much back and forth am I engaging in with my child about getting out of bed? How much attention am I giving, even in my own head, to that irritability and the grumpiness, and letting that have that rebound, like effect on my mood and my confidence in that moment. And so, as we said before, easier said than done. But I think what we're trying to be mindful of is, how do we be present and avoid shining our light on the non-compliance, the grumpiness, and those parts of the moment, and really hanging in there and catching those steps in the right direction, and attend, like showering our attention on those flowers, even if they seem like really, really small right now. They're really, really small, and we're trying to grow them incrementally. It is very challenging work, but I believe in you, and I believe in that strategy, because that's what, again, academically, what the research suggests for us, but also what we hear from families is a degree of disbelief of like, wow, I can't believe that ignoring worked, or when I like applied it really well to irritability, right? That when I really stopped engaging in the grumpy, irritable back and forth, when I stopped myself from doing that, it reduced. And so anyway, that is the parts of that I want to convey, and that there are also folks like me and others in the community who support families around these issues.
Okay, so one final question for our panel here. And this question comes from Cora. See you, Cora. How do you model turning off the phones when kids say it helps with current stressors? Kids are saying, but my phone helps. How do we model taking a break, turning off the phone, turning off the media? Which I would say is an important part of coping with this onslaught of information and stuff. How are we balancing that these days?
I can take a crack at that too. Sorry, I feel like I'm talking and talking here. I don't know the ages that we're talking about here. This sounds like it might be a middle school or teenager. Regardless.
Kids have phone these days, Tyler. Don't you know?
It's true. What I would, so a couple things. One is to have confidence that regardless of what they're saying, it's not a healthy habit to start. No matter how stressful things are right now, it is not a healthy habit. And going down that path, right, that's like a weed that we can accidentally reinforce because of the conditions. We can think, oh, this is a flower. It's a coping strategy. It's not, it's a weed. It's a weed. Don't do it. Don't fall for it, right? In that moment. And that's not to say that there aren't moments, certainly, right? There are absolutely the right time to use a screen as a distraction, but getting into a habit of using it that way, I think is where we need to be wary of it. And the way that I would model it is to basically, I would actually say aloud, I would model and say, something like this, even if it weren't true, and my apologies if this sounds like lying to kids, but I would say something like, you know what, lately with all this stress, I've really noticed myself like leaning on my device, my phone, as a way to like distract and soothe the different times. And I'm just starting to feel like it's actually negatively affecting my sleep, or it's actually not having the effect that I wish it was. And so, you know what? I'm just thinking like how, and again, saying this out loud to our kids, gosh, like what can I do about this? Like what can I do to solve this issue or problem for myself? And like what do you guys think about that? And engaging in some degree of conversation. Now many kids I guess would see through that, but I would really present it as a sincere conversation. That's a way that I really enjoy doing it, where it's like it is modeling, right? It's saying that it's modeling out loud this thought process of I'm identifying this as a challenge or a problem for me, and I'm wanting to do something differently about it and trying to engage our kids. I will say with younger children that will work. Like I have a lot of confidence in that, and with teenagers, I think you try to modify or adapt it to an appropriate level. But I'm open to reactions about that.
I could just jump in and say, in general, I really appreciate the question of like, how do I model it, right? So I also wonder if just saying like, I am taking a walk without my phone right now because that is actually going to settle my nervous system. Things like that. I mean, we're having so many struggles in our house around technology and right now because kids are home all the time, and with younger kids, just being for us like being really clear about limit. I mean, ideally we would be being really clear. It works better. We're really clear about how much time they can be on and how much time they have to do something else before they get it. That's more of a struggle if your kid has their own phone, right? So I would aim for that impulse that the parent shared of naming out loud, like, this is me setting my device down. This is me setting limits for myself. For them to see that.
I think our kids see like I experience a very real shift on nights when I'm plug my phone in far away and for hours I don't have it, right? I experience a very real shift in my mood and how tired my eyes feel and things like that. And I imagine that that is appreciated in some way by the people who live in my home with me. Um, so I think that that would be picked up too. I also want to acknowledge that we, kind of like what you're alluding to, Krista, we are using screen time in so many ways these days. Kids now have to use screen time for school. That is how they're connecting to peers and family members. And the struggles around phones and screens, I feel like has just really exponentially increased for everyone, because it's hard to know your priorities and also set boundaries around devices that are your only ways of accessing your priorities. There's no way to do this right. Oh, there's no right way. None. And I think we are all figuring it out together. Like Shayla said, this is our first time. Right. Well, thank you all so much for joining us today. That's all the time we have. I so appreciate our guests for joining us. Your expertise is unmatched, and I so appreciate your time. As I mentioned, our next Facebook Live panel will be on Friday, May 1st at 2:30. Resources are available at seattlechildrens.org/coping and COVID. Stay healthy and well, everyone.